Hi-Fi Rush is everything right about video games and everything wrong about corporate America. Who said that passion and creativity were dead when you've got a rockabye bitch slapper hacking and slashing robots to the beat of his internal metronome in a prismatic tune-shaded world made just for video game goofballs like him? It's a game that feels so alive in everything from the rhythm of the animated set pieces that move with the waves of the sound, the same precise way that a biological clock ticks true, and the comically comic-style action figures that work in sync with the pulse of the beating heart of the unsung hero. It's the return of a true character action game with all the makings of classic game design driven by fluid motion that rewards mastery in multiple playthroughs. The personality on display comes from putting your own pedal to the metal in the most creative ways you can think of, with a little help from the eagerness of heroes that don't take themselves too seriously, and the extra silliness of villains that just want to have fun. From the very first shot, it's clear that Hi-Fi Rush is going places that we, the audience, can't help but wanting to join along and experiencing ourselves, because everyone in the frame feels like they're having an adventure for adventure's sake, and not like they or the writers are trying to convince us to listen to their pretentious narrative about personal suffering. There will be a lot of real-world suffering at the end of this story, but it will be in spite of the great success of this game, and not because of it, or something underlying that we couldn't see right on the surface. The game was made with great care and decency, for passion and not for profit, even though I think it achieved that too, maybe just not enough. The importance of cinematography is to convey the cadence of action, and the musical sound to maintain the mood and energy. By introducing a strong opening sequence full of confidence and character, the momentum encourages our time investment and carries our interest like a good guitar riff carries a melody. Although a game should be told primarily through play and not plot, the light-hearted story is parts rebellion and a satirical indictment of the rich and powerful that are as clueless as they are careless, which is a relatable story in this day and age as any. Its villains are uncanny caricatures taking digs directly at real-life counterparts that are so deranged in actuality they may in fact have had to be toned down compared to the authentic nature of the self-indulgent sycophants of our world as to not be too cartoony in the game. But even if the appetite for ham and scene chewing is exaggerated here, everyone feels more natural in this world and its state of ridiculousness than the try-hard, somber, story-driven games appear to be. Chai is the oblivious, headstrong rebel who really just wants to jam. He prefers puns over philosophy, never stopping to pander or to preach to the audience, just to give a well-timed wink. Zanzo has the artist ego and the ambition bigger than any budget. The evil pop star princess marketing executive is more interested in promoting herself than her product.
Corsica. Ooh, what a twist.
Are Mimosa's pantomimed mannerisms and sensual struts for the audience or for Mimosa? Do we make art for the fans or for algorithms?
Corsica, is this show for the audience or for Mimosa?
Hi-Fi Rush incorporates many well-established elements in the genre, borrowing heavily and directly from Devil May Cry, with the style meter, ranking system, mission select, the Bloody Palace style survival mode, and the orb statues that you can hit for free money. All of this is in good faith and in service of making a good game in a genre that needs them now as much as ever before. And the dialogue is smart, snappy, and silly enough that we can laugh with the writers. The ridiculousness is memorable, with such one-liners as,
I put my stock in future, and not yours, kid.
They say you should keep politics out of art, that a story should bring a sense of escapism and nothing more. But smart storytelling can do both, and Hi-Fi Rush uses its writing to entertain as well as to inform us. The story has a message about the avarice and cruelty of corporate overlords, the perfect villains in games and for games. There's a very real-life parallel for all of these jackasses that directly correlates to what Microsofty did with and will likely do again in the future. Hi-Fi Rush flies high with glee, never getting too close to the sun, unlike Microsoft, who rewarded the hard work of the creators of Hi-Fi Rush by giving them the Hi-Fi flush down the toilet. out of arrogance and intolerance for anything less than what Call of Duty money will net you. I think they'll be back in some form or another, because having talent and high spirits means you'll always find a way to perk up, but Microsoft Xbox probably won't be back. For the last several reviews, I've talked about how action games are the best games because you can attack with speed, ferocity, and above all, tempo. Hi-Fi Rush not only understands this philosophy, but it makes its very blueprint out of the idea, hammering out the beat combo strings on the guitar strings, signaling to the player to react as intuitively to fast-paced sound and visual cues as they would creatively by mixing and matching techniques in the heat of the flow state. Syncing to the rhythm of the beat is not just a gimmick, but a groove, as the pace of play is organic, with each attack falling on the beat without fail. This encourages mindfulness in the way of understanding when enemies will attack, through sight and sound cues, even if where isn't always obvious. And it also shows you how you should go about pressing buttons. Rather than spamming buttons, you have to consider input times and the length of animations. The attack animation always lands on a beat, but the player input on the beat is what really matters the most for the score and damage modifications. Like a musician playing out of tune, if you play Hi-Fi Rush without a sense of meter, then you'll sabotage your own performance. Or, on Rhythm Master, miss your cue and you're dead.
Miss your cue and you are dead.
By incentivizing extra score points and additional damage for the perfect timing, Hi-Fi Rush teaches you not to just mash heavy combos to brute force through the game, but to play with style and with precision. Of course, it's still possible to spam through basic combos and partner attacks to get the S ranks, but the game is very clear that recycling the same moves in succession gives you a score penalty, and if you're just using the basic attacks, you will lose out on efficiency and probably end up making costly mistakes anyway, because a player that only engages with the basics in a game, that is trying its best to encourage high-level play, is not only cheating themselves of the true experience, but also underestimating the difficulty of the design. I do think that the S ranks are generally a bit too lenient and user-friendly, given the potential skill ceiling that Hi-Fi Rush facilitates. You only get judged in 3 categories, and you hardly get penalized for taking damage, outside of dying, and the overall ranking, compared to the SS ranks in DMC3 or the pure Platinum ranks in Bayonetta, which require no damage for the entire mission. Hi-Fi Rush is a breeze to rank, but the capacity to play with modifications in various challenge modes is always available for the true sadists that are out there. One thing that I feel that could have been tweaked to improve the ranking system would be to either require stricter play or allow you to bypass the requirements if you simply get enough style points for the fight. The score system tally marks don't make a whole lot of sense, as you can get 2 S ranks and a B, which will still give you an A, but you can get a B, a C, and an S, and also get an A. It would make more sense if you got such a high score threshold that your end result could bypass the default metrics and just earn you the S rank anyway, outside of maybe taking too many hits during the encounter. It's kind of the way that DMC4 and even DMC5's scoring system worked. If you got enough style points, you could pretty much bypass not getting the orbs or the time requirement for a mission. For not doing those, you would still lose the additional modifiers, but if you had a metric ton of style points by farming, then you would still earn the S rank. The same is true with Ninja Gaiden Master ranks. You can lose out on time, but get so much karma that you would have to earn the Master rank anyway. At the same time, you do get a perfect purple S for getting an S on every course in the track, and you get the bonus star for not taking any hits. But even getting half A's and half S's will still net you the S for the mission. It's convenient, but for those that want the ultimate skill ceiling, Hi-Fi Rush does lack a bit, not so much in combo variety, but surely weapon variety and the scoring system. At least the game does have a score system though, and one that is mostly easy to get the feel for. On the other hand, perfect play should mean not getting hit and fumbling your combo, but it should also incorporate improvisation. Go too fast and you won't be stylish. Be too stylish and you might take too long, at least according to whoever's taking time. The goal is to meet all of the metrics to the metronome. It's a mostly balanced and concise scoring system, but it could have been a bit more stringent while at the same time a little more forgiving for not getting 70% of the just timing. This system can be exploited by reducing your total moves and just spamming dodge to the beat to inflate your percentages. Although it does encourage more tactical play, it would be a bit arbitrary if I lost out on an S rank in Devil May Cry just because I decided to pause and taunt instead of fighting to the conductor's sheet music. You should be able to march at the beat of your own drum, and although the developers were smart enough to fine-tune the experience to a sense of equilibrium, it does feel a bit arbitrary at times to have to march directly to their beat. But that's the way that you keep things fresh and try to spin a unique twist in a genre that has some nearly flawless entries that are hard to measure up to. It's a clever design and a cohesive one, and most of my complaints about the just timing mechanic are alleviated in the BPM Rush Turbo mode, where everything is sped up so that there's no time for delay or for error. At least Hi-Fi Rush doesn't penalize you for the total mission time, and it also doesn't care about how many gears you earn in a mission. But like a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, enemy placement is very tight, confined to set rooms, but after long stretches of traversal that could have been cut in half in many cases, and without the need to be initiated first by some kind of cutscene. Some of the encounters are questionable though, with incongruence. You'll come across a room with multiple waves of contrasting enemy types, signifying the need for creativity in solving the puzzle. Then right after, it'll be followed up by a small wave of grunts that's hardly worth the time or energy to fight. The boss fights are good and varied, although there's no Zanzo fight, which is a big bummer. And the final boss, Kale, is a bit of a runner with some obvious gimmicks. But Mimosa was fun, and the mini-bosses themselves are really cool too. Generally, they test all the skills that you've learned in one, and they showcase why parries should always be implemented as a half measure in between attacks, rather than being the entire crux of the combat. You get something close to dodge offsets here by being able to continue a combo and also parry during the combo string, landing 2 hits in one and taking no damage. You can parry almost anything, and parries guard break quickly, usually in 1 or 2 hits, rather than withering down the barrier and forcing you into a slow, repetitive cycle of waiting for the enemy to whiff and then punish. You can pull off a jam combo in an overkill state as well, juggling to your heart's content, and then slingshotting over to the next crash dummy. Although for all the rush, there is a bit of a slow crawl through the levels too, which might be for the goal of setting the mood to the tune of atmosphere and soundtrack, but it also ends up as a hindrance for replay value, making you sit through some unskippable dialogue and tutorial sections. Especially so when you have to beat the game 5 times on 5 difficulties with S ranks for all of them for the 100%. It's by no means the worst offender of time mismanagement, and I understand that developers want to properly explain things to the player while also having some slice of life moments and banter between the characters, which they do a fine job of. But I would have appreciated a more streamlined design akin to the non-stop action of the Rhythm Tower for the main game as well. The puzzle sections, outside of the gimmick of matching the rhythm, aren't very interesting upon replay and end up being a time-wasting feature. It's why Ninja Gaiden Sigma removed some of the unneeded puzzle filler in the re-releases, because really, it's all about the action pieces. What I do appreciate about the level design is that there's a great detail put into the levels through the optional encounters with the NPCs that have a wide range of emotional responses and in-jokes to deliver, as well as upgrades to find from hidden areas and challenges. Though many of the Spectrador areas are irrelevant to go back to when going for the S ranks once you've received the reward in question, games that respect your time and your intelligence are the right partners for the jam session, and although Hi-Fi Rush qualifies in this category, it doesn't have quite the perfect pitch. But it tries its best and does a better job than most modern games, those that are often passionless and toothless, and it does enough to satisfy the old-school action regulars. It's tough to have a good rhythm game without good music and sound design, and Hi-Fi Rush doesn't disappoint here. The use of audio-visual cues to sync with battles, such as 808 and the controller speaker, is for substance and accessibility without feeling pedantic or hand-holdy. The sound effects just feel different, and the music is good on its own merits, as well as the voice acting, particularly from Robbie D as Chai, and I'll shout out Erica Lindbeck as Peppermint because she's another one of my favorites. It's not a role that only Robbie D could play, but it feels like one that he's ideal for. one that cements him as one of the most likable and more dynamic voice actors of this era, in my view. The actors are playful because they go where the characters take them, and it's easy to buy into the script when the script was written for real people and inclusive for the right reasons. The tone is for adolescents, but the combat is for big boys. They cared enough to not only use licensed music, but to also create some original tracks that are soulful and well suited for the intensity of an action game. I played mostly on streamer mode, and I think that was for the best, because I really liked what I heard from the OST, especially the minimalism of some tracks and the heartfelt message from the game's director in the credits, stating that, "We've never been so proud. After thousands of hours polishing, no sweat." Like Chai, the director and his team made it with nothing but a guitar and a dream. And some good computers, of course. One of my favorite quotes ever about music and about success from entrepreneurship is from an anecdote attributed to Brian Eno, who said about the Velvet Underground's first album, even though their first album only sold 30,000 copies, everyone who listened to it started a band. The problem with Hi-Fi Rush is that, at least from a player-counter perspective, the game was a great success, though we can never know the full picture because the game was relegated to the greedy Gamepass, which is hard to imagine being good for the developers' pockets. And if it's not good for their financial well-being, I doubt it was good for Microsoft either. The PlayStation 5 port of Hi-Fi Rush seemed to be a concession of sorts in the console wars, and of course the game even plays better on a PS5 objectively speaking, what with the controller speaker and the haptic feedback providing a more natural experience tailored to this rhythm rock and sock'em. Incredibly, the game has more value for the discounted price of $20 or less than almost any mainstream full-price game, such as the $70 scam Stellar Bait from Shift Down. And yet Microsoft, in closing down the studio and disregarding Hi-Fi's accomplishment, seemed to be giving it away in a fire sale as if the game wasn't worthy of full retail. But whose fault would that be? The Games Pass seems like a great value for casuals, but not for the hardcore market that Microsoft claims it wants to be. If we live in a world where defects get recalled, then what happens to the successes? In an era obsessed with profit, it's not the rock and roll Iron Man that is the villain, it's the ones who brought him into the world just to exploit his talents without any concern for why people would be interested in such a performance to begin with. If a game fails in any financial way, you have to first look to the promoter and their shortcomings. Tango's sad state of affairs was predicated by the in-game references to corporate bullshit, the ironic references that people like Phil Spencer, who is a self-proclaimed gamer, either failed to notice or to care about. The entire game's story is a metaphor for how passion triumphs over lackadaisical approaches to doing anything. For a doofus like Chai that unintentionally whiffs in comical ways, even his screw-ups are spectacular, as are his riffs. But he never fails because he never gives up. His optimism is rooted in passion, not because of sentimentality, and I sense that is what will drive the developers forward through this unfair predicament, the fight against corporate authority and the money people. It isn't an excuse to say that passion can't or shouldn't be profitable. It's just that the joy that a game gives someone perhaps should not be quantified by dollar signs that have a value subject to change with inflation. Making something good cannot be calculated. It's not an exact science, but if quality can be measured, first ask the audience. Hi-Fi Rush's developers were dedicated to making games that are like a box of chocolates, which in this best possible context means making games of various kinds, and not just games designed to appeal to no one in particular. Sadly, we won't know what we could get next, because all the suits care about are the Q4 forecasts. When Tango was bought by Bethesda, who was then bought by Microsoft, they assumed with power would come responsibility, only to find their savior become their oppressor. Tango was supposed to be a family until Microsoft ripped them apart. But for the action game fam, the song remains and the beat goes on.
I wish I could parry your rejection.